Her kiss burned him before battle. But colder still was her whisper, "Forgive me for what I'll do after." Commander Jace Arden stood at the edge of the human base, looking out over the barren, jagged landscape of Valor 7. The planet's surface was a mix of black rock and red dust, winds whipping around the metal fortifications of the last human outpost. Beyond the horizon, the Xylar fleet had gathered in the orbiting shadows, their alien warships glinting like cold steel under the twin suns. Every human soldier on this base knew the truth. Today could decide the fate of their entire species. Jace adjusted his uniform and checked his pulse. He had led humans into countless fights across the galaxy, but there was a tension in the air that he had never felt before. It was not fear. Not exactly. It was something heavier, deeper. A weight that came from knowing what they were about to face and realizing that the cost might be unbearable. Behind him, footsteps approached. Lyra Kale moved with her usual quiet precision, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon even as she walked toward him. She was a strategist, brilliant beyond words, and her counsel had saved countless human lives. But now, standing before him in the early light, she seemed more fragile than the confident officer he had come to rely on. "You're thinking too much," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the howl of the wind. Jace turned to her. "Someone has to think. Someone has to make sure we survive this." Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. She reached up and pressed her hand briefly against his chest, her touch light but firm. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was not a long kiss. Not one of comfort or passion. It was a spark, an ignition. It left warmth on his lips and cold realization in his mind. The kiss said more than words could ever say. They cared for each other. But duty came first. Pulling back, she whispered, words that cut deeper than any weapon. "Forgive me for what I'll do after." Jace's heart skipped. Her whisper was a promise, a warning, and a secret rolled into one. He wanted to ask what she meant, but the sound of the Xylar ships preparing their descent made speech impossible. Instead, he nodded, forcing calm into his voice. "Then we survive. That's all that matters right now." Lyra gave a small nod, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of determination and sadness. "Survive," she echoed. The human fleet was ready. Jace and Lyra joined their team in the armored command vehicles, engines rumbling as they moved toward the drop point. Soldiers and pilots exchanged terse greetings, tension in every glance. This was not the first fight for humanity, but it might be the last if they failed. As the vehicles moved across the jagged terrain, Lyra accessed the holographic maps, pointing out Xylar's strong points. "Their defenses are concentrated here and here," she said, gesturing to the glowing points on the map. "If we split the forces, we can push them back, but it will require precise timing. One mistake and we lose everyone." Jace studied the map. He knew she was right. Lyra's strategies were brilliant, but they were also risky. Every life on this mission depended on flawless execution, and even then luck would play a role. The first clashes began near the rocky ridges. Xylar drones surged from hidden craters, their metallic claws flashing in the sun. Human squads opened fire, plasma rifles cutting through the air with sharp precision. Jace led the charge, moving from cover to cover, guiding his soldiers through the maze of rocks and dust. Amid the chaos, he saw Lyra orchestrating movements from the command vehicle, her hands flying over holographic controls, adjusting squad positions, calling for reinforcements. Her face was calm, almost detached, yet there was an intensity in her eyes that Jace had never seen before. She was brilliant, ruthless in strategy, and yet fragile in a way that made him want to protect her. Hours passed, and the battle escalated. The humans gained ground, pushing Xylar forces back toward the cliffside. Jace's squad had lost 2 men and another was injured, but the enemy was faltering under the human offensive. Each move Jace made was calculated, each command precise. He and his soldiers fought not just for victory, but for survival. Yet even as the battle raged, the weight of Lyra's whisper pressed on him. "Forgive me for what I'll do after." He could not understand it, could not guess what she meant. Was it a personal choice she would make? A tactical risk she planned to take? The uncertainty gnawed at him, even as he led his men with unwavering focus. By late afternoon, the battlefield quieted slightly. Xylar forces had retreated to a narrow canyon, and the humans secured the ridges. Jace allowed himself a brief moment to breathe. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the scarred terrain. He looked toward Lyra, who had exited the command vehicle and was surveying the aftermath. She turned toward him, her expression unreadable. "It's not over," she said, voice low. "They will regroup, and when they do, we must be ready." Jace wanted to reach out to ask her about her words, but he sensed it was not the time. "Then we prepare," he replied. As night fell, human engineers worked to fortify their position. Fires from destroyed Xylar drones cast flickering light across the rocks. Soldiers huddled together, some tending to the wounded, others simply sitting in silence. Jace found Lyra standing on a ridge looking out into the dark horizon. He walked up to her, feeling the ache of exhaustion and the pull of his emotions. "You really scared me today," he said quietly. "Your kiss, your whisper." Lyra turned to him, eyes soft but resolute. "I did what I had to do. What you will see tomorrow, it might feel like betrayal. But trust me, it's not." He swallowed hard, feeling the truth in her words even without understanding them fully. The galaxy had thrown humans into impossible situations before, but this time, the stakes were higher than ever, and whatever Lyra planned, he would face it with her. The night deepened. Jace and Lyra stayed on the ridge for a while, watching the stars and listening to the faint hum of distant Xylar engines. There was a quiet tension between them, a mix of unspoken emotions, mutual respect, and the looming uncertainty of what was to come. Finally, Lyra spoke, breaking the silence. "Rest now. Tomorrow everything changes." Jace nodded, his hand brushing briefly against hers. He felt a spark of warmth, a reminder that even in war, humanity's strength was in its heart, its courage, and the bonds it forged. As they returned to the base, the two shared a silent understanding. The battle had been won, but the war, and the choices they would face, was far from over. And somewhere in the shadows of the coming day, Lyra's whispered warning would become real. The night held them in quiet anticipation, a calm before the storm. And Jace, standing beside Lyra, understood that no matter what happened, they would face it together. The first light of Valor 7's twin suns spilled across the jagged landscape, painting the rocks in shades of gold and crimson. The humans had survived the initial clash, but the battle was far from over. Commander Jace Arden stood on the ridge, scanning the horizon. He could see the remnants of Xylar war machines scattered across the plains, smoldering and broken. Yet he knew better than to underestimate them. Lyra Kale joined him, her steps silent on the rocky surface. She had been awake all night, recalculating troop positions, predicting enemy maneuvers, and planning their next move. Her calm presence contrasted with the chaos around them, but there was an edge to her demeanor that made Jace wary. "The Xylar are regrouping," she said, pointing to the distant canyon where the enemy forces had retreated. "They'll try to encircle us if we're not careful." Jace nodded. "Then we strike first. We can't wait for them to decide the battle." Lyra's eyes flicked to him, sharp and assessing. "I've considered it," she said softly. "There's a way to force them back, but it requires sacrifices." Jace's chest tightened. He had learned long ago that war demanded hard choices, but something in her voice warned him that these sacrifices would weigh heavily. He remembered her whispered words from the night before. "Forgive me for what I'll do after." Before he could question her further, alarms blared across the base. Xylar fighters streaked down from orbit, dark shapes against the glowing sky. Humans scrambled to their defensive positions, weapons charging, engines roaring. Jace moved with practiced precision, leading squads to intercept the attackers. Lyra remained at the command post, directing the flow of the battle. Her voice was steady, but Jace could see the strain behind her eyes. Every command she gave was calculated, every decision deliberate. Lives hung in the balance, and she carried that weight alone. The battle raged across the rocky plains. Plasma fire lit the sky, striking Xylar ships with precision. Humans moved with coordination and courage, their teamwork honed through years of survival against overwhelming odds. Jace and his squad pushed forward, clearing out enemy nests, disabling drones, and rescuing trapped soldiers. Through it all, Lyra's strategy unfolded perfectly. She anticipated the enemy's movements, setting traps and lures, forcing the Xylar into positions where their strength became a weakness. Yet with every successful maneuver, Jace noticed a hint of hesitation in her commands, as if she carried a secret, a burden too heavy to share. By midday, the battlefield shifted in humanity's favor. Xylar forces were retreating deeper into the canyon, but the humans had taken heavy casualties. Jace moved among his soldiers, offering encouragement and guidance, but his thoughts kept returning to Lyra. He needed to understand her words from the night before, the meaning behind her whispered warning. Finally, the critical moment arrived. Lyra called him to the command vehicle, her expression unreadable. "Jace, I need to show you something," she said. She opened a holographic map of the canyon, revealing the Xylar's hidden positions. "They've set up a final stronghold," she explained. "If we attack directly, we risk losing everyone. But there's another way. We can force them out by detonating controlled charges along the canyon walls. It will collapse part of their base, but some of our positions will be in danger. We have to trust the timing precisely." Jace's eyes widened. "You mean human lives, our men, will be at risk?" Lyra met his gaze, calm and unwavering. "Yes, but it's the only way to secure victory and ensure the rest of humanity survives. The alternative is losing the planet and potentially the entire sector." He swallowed hard, understanding the weight of her words. This was what she had meant with her whisper. It was not a personal betrayal, but a strategic choice that would haunt them both. "I trust you," he said finally, voice steady, despite the fear in his chest. "We'll do it together." Lyra nodded, relief flashing briefly across her face. "Then prepare the squads. We move in 10 minutes. The human forces advanced carefully, moving into the positions Lyra had designated. Jace led his squad along the rocky slopes, setting charges and coordinating with other teams. The tension was unbearable. One misstep could mean disaster. Yet the soldiers followed without hesitation, inspired by the confidence in their leaders. As they reached the final positions, the Xylar realized the trap too late. The charges detonated in perfect sequence, shaking the canyon and sending debris crashing down on the enemy stronghold. Xylar forces were scattered, their final defenses destroyed. Humans moved swiftly, securing the canyon and rescuing soldiers caught in the falling rocks. When the dust settled, the battlefield was quiet except for the crackle of fires and distant alarms. Humanity had won. The Xylar were in retreat, and their plans to conquer Valor 7 had failed. Jace walked through the canyon, surveying the aftermath. Soldiers were exhausted but alive, their determination and courage evident in every face. And then he saw Lyra, standing on a ridge above the chaos, her silhouette framed by the twin suns. He approached her, heart heavy but full of relief. "It's done," he said softly. Lyra turned to him, eyes meeting his with a mixture of triumph and sorrow. "Yes," she said, "but we made hard choices today. Lives were risked and some we couldn't save." Jace took her hand, holding it firmly. "You did what was necessary. You saved humanity. That is what matters." She shook her head, a small, sad smile on her lips. "It still doesn't feel enough. The burden of decisions, it stays with you," he nodded, understanding. War demanded sacrifices, and those who led bore the heaviest weight. Yet he also knew that her brilliance, courage, and willingness to face impossible choices had secured the future of humanity. For a moment, they stood together in silence, watching the horizon. The Xylar fleet was retreating, their dark shapes vanishing into space. Human soldiers cheered quietly, exhaustion giving way to relief, their unity and perseverance shining through the hardship. Jace squeezed Lyra's hand. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together. We've survived today and we'll survive tomorrow." Lyra's eyes softened, the tension of the past hours fading slightly. "Together," she agreed. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the canyon, the humans began rebuilding their base. Fires were extinguished, wounds tended, and the survivors gathered to honor those who had fallen. The victory was hard won, but it was proof of human resilience, ingenuity, and courage, the qualities that had carried them across the stars and against impossible odds. Jace and Lyra remained on the ridge a while longer, looking out over the land they had fought to protect. There was still much to do. The war was not over, and the Xylar would return. But for the first time in weeks, they felt a spark of hope. Humanity had faced overwhelming darkness and emerged stronger. Lyra turned to Jace, her expression resolute. "Tomorrow we rebuild, we prepare, and we continue to prove why humanity can survive anything." Jace smiled, feeling the weight of exhaustion and relief wash over him. "Then let's make sure they never forget it." The two stood together as the last light of day faded side by side, a symbol of human courage and unity. And though the battles ahead would test them again, they knew one undeniable truth: humanity, guided by wisdom, bravery, and heart, could overcome even the most impossible odds. And in the quiet of that victory, Jace finally understood the meaning of her whispered words. Forgiveness was not just about the choices made in battle. It was about recognizing the strength, courage, and humanity that had carried them through. They had survived. They would continue to survive. And together, they would face whatever the galaxy could throw at them next.